Hey guys, what's going on? James here, and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are scheduled to interview Antwaan Randel for their offensive coordinator position. This is somebody who has worked with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in the past, and a lot of Bucs fans should be familiar with him. Joining me is Evan Wanish, co-host of the Cannon Fire podcast, writer at BucsNation.com, and also on Instagram as well. Evan, former Tampa Bay Buccaneer offensive assistant, getting a look here. Hasn't done much as a coach in the entirety of the NFL, but also a former player. He was with the Steelers, the Washington football team, and back again with the Steelers as well. Thoughts and opinions on Antwaan Randel?
Well, Antwaan Randel, Super Bowl 55 champion to you, but
It's facts.
uh, no, and the good thing about it is this wasn't the case where Antwaan Randel, obviously he's with the Detroit Lions now as their wide receivers coach. He's been there since 2021. This was a case of not him being fired from Tampa Bay due to poor performance or anything. He got promoted. So, it was sort of like the Arians coaching tree, right? Bruce Arians brought Antwaan Randel onto the Buccaneers staff when Arians was hired back in 2019. Randall was with the Bucs from 2019 and 2020. They win the Super Bowl in 2020. Anton Randall goes to the Detroit Lions. So and now he's getting a look here. So obviously, without it's without saying, Todd Bowles has experience with him, right? Todd Bowles knows him. He coached with him for 2 years. I know it's a completely different side of the ball, but he knows him. And I do think it's interesting just to maybe, even if you just want to pick his brain, and sometimes that's what these interviews are for, honestly, just to pick a guy's brain, see what they think about the current situation. And Anton Randall could be a guy who I'm sure Arians, I'm sure if Bowles asked Arians would say, yeah, go ahead, right? I'm sure it's a guy that Arians endorsed. It's a guy that Bowles knows. It's a guy Jason Light knows. So there's a lot of familiarity there. And obviously, the Detroit Lions have one of the better offenses in the NFL. Their season just ended, but Ben Johnson seems primed to land, most likely, I would say, the Commanders' head coaching job. So, hey, maybe you can try and get Antoine Randall before the Commanders potentially do. So, um, and Antwaan Randel actually played in Washington, so there might be some advantage for the Commanders there. But if the Buccaneers do want him, it would make a lot of sense. Obviously, there's no Baker Mayfield connection there, but there's a Todd Bowles and Tampa Bay connection. And I would say this is actually one of the first one, and really, honestly, only one. Even the guys that have been hired so far, there's not much like Bowles or Buccaneers connections with these offensive coordinator roles, besides this one.
Yeah, and by the way, the work with the Lions pretty impressive. I mean, you really take a look at, of course, Amon St. Brown is somebody that the Buccaneers just got done playing in the playoffs. So Bowles got a pretty darn good look at the wide receiver group of Detroit. Also, they played him earlier this year. But also taking it a step further than that, like the Lions wide receivers have been incredibly overachieving, Evan. And part of that can be because of Antwaan Randall and the work that he has been able to do. That's just the way I see it. You have a lot of different guys there. Like Josh Reynolds is kind of a legit wide receiver now. Khalif Raymond has done some really interesting stuff as well. And a lot of that started happening whenever Antwaan Randall joined that staff. So it is interesting. Like you said, this is the first guy who has a connection to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, obviously previously with Bruce Arians' staff, and then getting promoted. Like you said, he wasn't fired. If he was fired, you may be a little bit more cautious about it, but he was promoted. One thing that's super interesting to me is that this is the first guy who's a non-quarterback guy getting some interest here from the Bucs. A wide receivers guy in Antwaan Randel, formerly a wide receiver himself. There's been a bit of a theme, a bit of a pattern here at the Bucs that they've looked at a lot of guys who have specialized at quarterbacks and whatnot. Antwaan Randel is the only different guy so far up to this point, so I think that's good. You can't give a guy a shot until he gets one, right? In terms of being an offensive play caller, so while some people may view it as a negative that he hasn't had an OC position yet, it is what it is. I mean, Dave Canales wasn't an OC before he came to the Bucs, and he did a pretty darn good job. So for me, I don't mind Antwaan Randall. I think he's got a great personality. I think he'd be a player's coach. and would very much gel well with what the Bucs have going on here. What are your thoughts and opinions about Randall L? Where would he be in terms of, you liking him as a candidate?
Yeah, I do like him. Obviously, there is risk involved here because he's never, not only has he not been offensive coordinator or offensive play caller, he hasn't been a coach that long.
Yeah.
So there is definitely, risk here with the Buccaneers. But, again, like a lot of people point to a guy like Thad Lewis. Thad Lewis hasn't been a coach for that long. So if you're comfortable with Thad Lewis, I would say, well, why not be comfortable with Antwaan Randel as well? So I do think, he'd be I don't think he'd be at the top, but he wouldn't be at the bottom either. I think he'd be sort of in that middle ground where it'd be all right. I would be okay with it. Wouldn't be maybe my first choice, but I do think the Buccaneers could do a lot worse. So I do think that I look. I think he's got a legit shot just because of that relationship, that he likely has, with the Buccaneers right now and with Todd Bowles. I mean, we have to remember, yeah, there has been some like changes along the coaching staff since Randall L has been gone, but at the same time, like Bowles has retained most of the defensive staff, and there's a good bit of the offensive pieces still here, right? And not only on the coaching staff, but personnel wise. He was the wide receivers coach for the Lions. Mike Evans, most likely, I would say, going to be back. Chris Godwin's here still. So, I mean, there's a lot of pieces that Randall L is going to be familiar with already. So, I do think he's a solid candidate for the job.
Yes, ultimately, we'll see what the Tampa Bay Buccaneers decide to do. Let us know your thoughts and opinions about this down in the comments section below. Go check out all of Evan's work at BucsNation, at the Cannon Fire Podcast, and on Instagram as well. Anyway, guys, we'll talk to you all in the next video or the next live stream. But until then, and as always, guys, goodbye for now, and go Bucs.